Hola, everyone. It is a pleasure for me to be here today at Hispanicized Latinas Represent Special Edition Latina Power and Equality panel. My name is Astrid Rivera, journalist and reporter for Despierta América Univision. And here today joining me is Mónica Ramirez, founder, president, Justice for Migrant Women, co-founder the Latinx House, poderista en Alianza Nacional de Campesinas. También con nosotros Selenis Leyva, actor, activist, and author. Y Nancy Negrón, Power Up Fund, co-founder and impact-led at Eureka. Welcome, ladies. Bienvenidas. It is a pleasure for me to be here with you guys today. This diverse panel of powerful women will be sharing insights of what it means to be a Latinas in today's world, the obstacles still to overcome, and their thoughts about la contribución de Latinas en Estados Unidos. The Latina Power and Equality movement is on the rise. And with this discussion, we hope to make one thing very clear. Somos Poderosas. So let's just start with the first question. Anyone can answer this question, but I'm gonna go with you, Nancy. What does it mean to be a Latina in America today? And what excites you the most about the strides that are being taken toward the Latina power and equality? What do you see as the biggest obstacles right now?
You know, I was thinking about that this morning. What it means to be Latina in America right now means you are constantly under pressure. You are constantly with your hands up for the next fight, right? But in all of that, you also are surrounded by a tribe of women who across the globe, across North America, are doing what you're doing in their own way, in their own community. So there's a collective thread that runs through us. So you feel like you're part of a bigger sisterhood. But the truth of the matter is that right now in this moment, we are all hands up and kind of arms around each other, protecting each other. But that's our reality right now. And I think what it means to be a Latina means you need to know when to step in to do battle. We need to know when it's time to take care of one another. We need to be able to read the room to know when I need to step into a position of power of control or when I need to cede that control to a friend, a colleague, a fellow warrior or guerrera who knows how to take up arms when I'm tired, right? So it's like, that's the balancing act is what is for me, the quintessential Latina role and moment right now. We are balancing not just the future of our children and our communities and our families, but of what's going to happen on a global level around racial equality, around gender equality. We at it. So we have very, very strong shoulders. And we have very, very quick wits and very fast tongues, as my mother would say, la lengua media visperina que tengo. But the truth of the matter is that we have to be able to speak truth to power. And I think that that's the moment that we're in. So right now to be a Latina means I soy una guerrera. I'm speaking truth to power. I'm learning how to do a better job of taking care of myself. But the entire time, my hands are up and I'm ready to kind of go to battle for those that I care about the most. So our role is that of warrior and of caretaker, but of power builder as well.
As your shirt says, brava pero cute.
Yeah.
I think it's really important for the unity. You said something that is really important. It's like that you lend a shoulder and you let them, other Latinas, know that you're there for them. So Monica, I'm gonna go with you. What do you see as the biggest obstacles right now in being a Latina today?
Thank you. Well, you know, I think we can't have this conversation without naming the fact that more than 1 million Latinas have been pushed out of the workforce during this COVID pandemic. And going into the pandemic, we were already in a very precarious position because the pay gap for Latinas still remains to be one of the widest. You know, the most recent data showing 54 cents to the dollar. paid to white male workers. We have one of the largest wealth gaps of any other demographic in our country. And that was before the pandemic. Now that more than 1 million Latinas have been pushed out of the workforce, there are a lot of big questions about what it means to rebuild for Latinas and what are going to be the on-ramps to get Latinas back to work, to help the Latinas whose businesses have closed because of the pandemic. There are a lot of question marks, and certainly all forms of gender discrimination have been major hurdles for us, not just the pay gap. We see high rates of sexual harassment, pregnancy discrimination, and these other issues that I've spent the majority of my career working on. Those are problems we've always had. But now they've just been exacerbated by a crisis that we're all living through. And I couldn't agree more with everything that Nancy said. What we've seen in this past year, and I would say in the past few years, is that despite all odds, we are still finding ways to come together, and we're figuring out how to lift each other up in the face of these major hurdles and obstacles that are setting us behind. So despite the difficulties that we continue to face, we still manage to show our resilience and to show our power, even through some of the darkest days.
You mentioned something really important too, and I want to go with Selenis. Thank you so much for being here, actor, activist, and author. What does it mean to be a Latina? You are in an entertainment business, and maybe you see everything from another side too, but you're there. What does it mean for you to be a Latina, and what do you think are the biggest obstacles that we as a Latina have today?
I think everything that Nancy has said and Monica is relevant to Hollywood. It's not a different world. Being a Latina in Hollywood does not exclude, me from knowing and feeling what's happening worldwide with us. Like Nancy so eloquently said, and I was like, I feel you, we're always ready, it's always combat. It's always like the warrior. It's always coming on expecting that we have to work harder to achieve just the scratching the surface of what a lot of other people have accomplished, and are settled in. I think the Latinas in general, for me, what I've continued to experience in Hollywood as an Afro-Latina is proving myself, proving that I can play anything, proving that I can do the person who's in prison, incarcerated, and I could play a lawyer, and I could play an ambassador, and I can play a doctor, and I can play a lead in a movie. Those things are still a struggle. So I continue, and I see that in my other hermanas in the industry. We continue to fight, and especially if you can't pass for other. If you are like us and you can't pass for other, the struggle continues to be very real.
On average, Latinas in the US are paid 45% less than white men and 30% less than white women. Over the course of a 40-year career, it is estimated that Latinas stand to lose over $1 million due to the wage gap. Most are aware of Latina Equal Pay Day, which is a positive step towards acknowledging this issue. But I want to ask you this question: what more needs to be done to bridge this gap?
I think that we need to be in those rooms. I think that we need to be in the rooms that are making the decisions, in the rooms that are going against the studios and saying, for me in particular, I'm talking about studios because I'm talking about my own life. And I know that there is discrepancies. I know that I have been a part of a hit show where I have walked away after years knowing well that I was underpaid. And not just me, but my sisters, underpaid. I think that, we're so scared to speak up. We're so afraid, and we are afraid because we know how hard it is to get to this place. It's this feeling of if you speak up, they're going to, label you difficult. Suddenly it's not about the inequality. Suddenly it'll be about your attitude. So I think that we all have to come together and say enough is enough. We've seen too much of this inequality, and it's blatant. It's not something that we are inventing. The numbers are there. It is factual. But I do know that if we all band together, this abuse of power, this abuse of this lack of fairness couldn't exist. We're allowing it to. I really do feel that we're allowing it to, but I know that it comes from fear. I know that it comes from fear. I know that you don't want to be labeled the difficult person. You don't want to be because guess what? The road that Selenis doesn't take for less than, somebody else will come and take for even less than that. Mm-hmm. So I think that we really need to start demanding and realizing our worth. And again, I'm only looking at it from my industry, but I would say that would pretty much trickle into any other industry. If we all kind of band together and said enough is enough, we demand justice, we demand to be paid our worth. That's the only way we're going to see the difference, as far as I can see.
Thank you so much. Monica, you are a backbone for migrant women. You have worked with a lot of campesinas, and you are there for them. What more needs to be done to bridge that wage gap?
I think it's really important for people to understand that while there is an average pay gap for Latinas, it is just that. There are some Latinas who are paid even less than the average. So if the national average is 54 cents to the dollar, based on the data we currently have, we know that the average for an immigrant Latina, not necessarily even a migrant woman worker, but an immigrant Latina, is 37 cents to the dollar. And depending on what community we come from within the Latinx community, the gap can be much wider or lower. So for example, we know that women from Central America actually have the widest pay gap amongst Latina workers. This is the data that we have. The data that we have is based on year-round full-time employment. That means it doesn't count people who are working part-time. It doesn't count people who are being paid under the table. It doesn't count people who are working as gig workers. So there are many, many Latinas who we can't actually even account for. It doesn't count the experience of trans Latinas or many undocumented Latinas. So for migrant women workers, the situation we understand is quite bleak. And if you look at farm worker women specifically, the little data that we have shows that farm worker men on average are paid about $16,000 a year, and farm worker women are paid an average of $11,000 a year. And any way you cut it, whether it's $11,000 a year or being paid 54 cents to the dollar, it's not enough. It's certainly not enough for a Latina worker or our families.
Yeah, I'd love to follow up on that if I could, Astrid. I think Monica's hitting all the pieces that we need to kind of keep our eye on as we start to think about this recovery after COVID. We need to be thinking about, is it an equitable recovery? Because we don't want to go back to what we had. What we have is wholly inequitable to begin with. So we need to leapfrog beyond that. But I also want to bring home the point that when you think about the pay gap, and just in case people don't think that this matters to the national economy, think about how women making less money and bringing less money home, especially if they're single heads of household, how does that impact children? How does that impact household expenses? How does that impact their future? The largest number of children living in poverty are Latino children in this country. So think about the fact that their mothers are making a quarter to 50% to in some cases up to 70% less. And what does that mean in terms of what they can provide for that child? That means I can't live in the neighborhood I want to live in. And we know that certain neighborhoods have certain schools, which now means I've impacted not just my child's food on their plate, home I can live in, school they can go to, which then has outcomes for that next generation around college attainment and everything else. But then for that same Latina who's been living for less, with less because of the gender-based pay gap and the racial inequity in there, think about what that means when they go to retire. women of color retire into poverty quite often. And we have to think about that. So you might have worked for 30, 40, 50 years of your life, and you've paid into a system, but you were paying into the system at less because you were being discriminated against, and so your pay was less. So by the time you go to retire, the amount that you have to retire with is much less than it should have been. So not only is it impacting the next generation of children and their outcomes, but we're also impacting that woman later on in life when she retires after a 30, 40-year career into poverty.
As a Latina leader who has accomplished so much, talk about your journey to have a seat at so many powerful tables throughout your career. What you did differently to overcome the obstacles we have been talking about today?
I think it took me a long time to learn to show up in places as my complete and whole self. Right? I used to walk into meetings showing people the part they wanted to see for that role. When I led the Women's Bureau, you know, there was a particular type of work and a face that you saw. When I went into, you know, education, the educator in me was the one you were talking to. And then I finally learned one day, and it took me a long time. I'm not going to say my age, but it took me a long time to get to the point where I could walk into a meeting being my complete self. And there is power in that. So all of a sudden, I don't have to be asked to be at the table. I'm at the table because for whatever reason, maybe it's now memorable because I walk in and people, the first thing they tell you at meetings, especially for those of us that have worked in DC, you guys know how bad this feels when they go, so what do you do? Right? That's the number one question you get asked in DC. And I've learned to not deal with that question. I've learned to talk about who I am. Right? And so I think that my power comes from showing up as a poor kid from the hood who had a father who was a drug addict, who had a mother who was an activist, who did all those things. I'm no longer afraid to bring all those pieces in to my work because I know that my story, our stories collectively reach women. And sometimes when you're feeling really desperate and really tired and really done with it all, you need to know that there's someone out there just like you, ready to kind of pick up the battle for you. So I think for me, learning to navigate the halls of power in places like Congress really meant that I came as my whole self, because nobody is better at being a poor Latina woman than me, right? Nobody in that room knows those roles the way I know that role. Nobody in that room knows what it was like to be a poor kid in the public school system in the hood of Philadelphia. No one else, right? So that brings you an authenticity, and it brings you a voice, and it brings you power. And the more we can stop hiding behind what we think the world wants to see and kind of dig down deep and be who we need to be, we show up at those meetings with our own power that nobody can take from us. Right? And that's what we get when somebody gives you a title or gives you a role. That's power that's given to you. And I'm really tired of that type of power. I'm about not letting somebody give it to me. It's owning it, knowing who I am, but it comes from those life experiences. And the women here on this screen that are with me, each of us have had to kind of blaze our own, you know, paths forward. And I have to say that what I've learned the most from working with women like Monica is use your voice from exactly where you are, exactly who you are. It takes us a while to get there, but that's where authentic power comes from. And that's how I broker kind of relationships in the room. Because let me tell you how quickly people shut up in a room when they're rattling off their resume and you say, well, I'm the daughter of a drug addict who was homeless. So I know the homeless system a heck of a lot better than you do. You shut down that room in a way that people don't quite know how to handle, and you now have that control and the power that nobody can take from you.
Selenis, no solamente eres una gran actriz, te hemos visto en esta gran serie de Orange is the New Black, ahora también te vemos en esta serie de Disney, The Diary of a Future President, pero también conocemos esa parte de ti de activismo y también de autora con este libro que acabas de escribir, que es una memoria dedicada a tu hermana, My Sister, How One Sibling's Transition Changed Us Both, with an important message of inclusion, understanding, and equality for the LGBTQ community.
You know, I think that once I decided to approach my sister, Marisol, who is a transgender woman, I said, you know, I want you to share your story. And going back to what Nancy was saying, you know, when you show up your authentic self and you share your story, your truth, that's power. So I wanted to give my sister Marisol her power, her voice, a platform. I have been so fortunate to be a working actress, you know, and I say that I'm well aware of how hard it is and how many wonderful performers exist out there that never have the opportunities that I have. So I don't take my career for granted for a second. And it's about giving back. So I have this platform. People want to suddenly hear what I have to say. I have something to say. I have a transgender sister, and it has not been easy for her. And I want her to tell her story, and I want you to listen. And so I think that that was the moment for me, especially because I know that the Latina experience, the Latinidad experience, was not part of the narrative when it came to the transgender stories being told. It was important for me to give her that moment, to give us as a community that moment, to be educated, because not everything has to come from scarcity. You know, not everything is from gloom and doom. It was hard for my family, but we were able to overcome, to be supportive to my sister. So again, it all comes with conversation. It comes with education. The more we educate ourselves, the more we have these conversations for our community, the more things will change. I know that for me, it was really important, especially after the Caitlyn Jenner coming out and the Vanity Fair cover, and it was just, oh my, and I felt so happy for her. But I remember it didn't sit well with me because I said, this is not the story. This is not the voice of the transgender community. It is not easy to get hormones. It is not easy to get a job. It is not easy to get on the cover of a magazine, you know? So I wanted to tell our story, and it's uncomfortable at times, it's nitty gritty, but it's our truth. And we've gotten so many wonderful responses from people all over the world after reading our book. You know, just the other day, I received a letter from someone, I think it was from France, that she's saying, well, I'm translating the book because I want other people to be able to read this book. And then someone else saying, I gave this to my cousin and he was able to come out to his family. So that to me fills me. That to me is better than any, you know, I don't know, red carpet moment that I could possibly have. Is to continue to educate, especially our community. The LGBTQ plus community still, when it comes to Latinos, we still have a struggle, whether it's because of machismo, you know, the way we've been conditioned to believe that men and women have certain roles, it's still very strong. And so the hope is that with this book, that it is available in Spanish as well, that we could continue to give back to our people, to give, because I do believe that with education, there's so much power. So to continue to educate our community so that we can achieve more and be there for each other. So my sister came from a place of pure love and a place, like Nancy said, showing up and being, this is who I am. You want to tell me about what it is to be trans? I'm going to have my sister tell you what it is to be trans. And I'm going to also share with you what it is to be the sister of a transgender woman from the Bronx, from a Cuban father, Dominican mother, Catholic household, you name it. And we were able to overcome. So that is why the book was written.
Thank you so much for that powerful insight. I think that, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of people that right now are struggling to do what your sister did, pretty much you guys are like parte de ese proceso de otra persona. So I'm really glad you guys did, and congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Monica, you founded an initiative which I love and I follow, called She Se Puede, now Poderista, along with powerful Latinas such as America Ferrera, Eva Longoria, and others. How did it all come together, and why the recent name change? And how are you and your co-founders using this new platform to unify and empower Latinas in America?
Yeah, well, thanks for following Poderistas. So, we created it because, as we've been saying in this conversation, there's been so many times when Latinas in our country have been treated and are considered an afterthought. People come to us at the very last minute to get engaged in a campaign, if they can come to us at all. Political leaders would come to America and to Eva, and they'd say, hey, will you go out and speak on our behalf? But it was always at the last minute. It was always like, 2 minutes before something needed to happen, then they'd think about the Latinas. And we, in conversation, there are 10 founders at Poderistas, and in different conversations, we just said, we know what we need. And we can build it. We don't have to wait for someone else to build it. We know exactly what's missing. We feel like there are these gaps, and let's just create something for us, by us, and for us. And when we went into the initiative in the fall, because we launched it in August of last year, we were really thinking of it as a project that we would build towards the election to ensure that Latinas were civically engaged, because the data was showing us that even though Latinas were and are registered to vote, we're one of the demographics where there's a big fall off between registration and actual voting. And the data kept coming back to show us that even though we are powerful, we have a confidence gap. The data kept telling us that we didn't believe that we actually made a difference. And so our project initially was really focused on closing that confidence gap and helping to send the message that we are powerful, and there's a way that we can organize together and be powerful together. And so that's how the project launched. And it was incredible to see the reception. Many Latinas of all ages signed on to be part of the community. And it's one of the fastest growing Latina platforms in the country. And I think that speaks to the fact that we were right in terms of what we were hungry for, that we wanted a platform that could speak to us, and it was not focused only on one area of our lives. It really understood that to lead whole, healthy lives, we have to be civically healthy, we have to be financially healthy, we have to be, have resources for our mental health and our physical health in a well-rounded way. And so that's what we've been building. When we launched, we were using the name Si Se Puede. We recently changed our name to Poderistas. Right before the end of the year, I guess in November, we decided to do a survey of our membership, because we grew to over 100,000 members within a couple of months, 100,000 followers. And we created a power squad. We had about 1,000 Latinas in a week sign up to be part of our power squad from all across the country. And we were getting a lot of feedback from folks about what it was they wanted to see. And in the survey that we did before the end of the year, it was clear that, we didn't have to invite people to or encourage people to feel powerful. We felt powerful, and we made a huge difference in the election. If you look at the election results across the country in a nonpartisan manner, Latinas were the difference in a lot of ways and showed up in huge numbers across the country. And so Poderistas feels right. It is a reflection of what we're building, which is a movement, a power movement for and by powerful Latinas who are trying to harness and leverage our power for the betterment of our community.
In the 2020 elections, it's well documented that people of color, especially Latina and Black women, materially influenced the outcome of the past elections. How do you feel Latinas in particular can best leverage this cloud and turn into a real change for our community?
I think that it's really important for us to pay attention to the moment that we're in. I keep saying that because I don't want the pain and suffering of 2020 to have gone to waste. No pain should be wasted, right? We should be growing from this. And I will say that Latinas and Black women, let me be clear about this, right? Showed up and showed off, because we did it. And what I think I would want more than anything else is for us to take that important lesson of it being a both and start to build those bridges, because it is so easy for the larger community around us to pigeonhole us as Latinas over here and Black women over there and all this kind of stuff. And they do that very well. And I think it is critically important for us to understand that the one thing we do really well as Latinas is bring people into the familia. And I think we need to be talking about how we do the work hand in hand with Black women, how we do the work specifically for the members of our community who may not be connected to the larger Black community and need some bringing in. I think what I want to be able to say is that you look at Latinas, we're not a race, right? We are many. And what is it? The sociologist, I want to see, Clara Rodriguez said that racially we are both, but culturally we are neither. And I think that's really important. And I think that we would do ourselves a world of good in taking the power and the momentum that we built off of this last election and start to really reach out to the other women who have just as much to protect and just as much to lose, and start to figure out how we build those bridges. Because I think there's this masterful thing that can be done when we start to link arms with our sisters who are at the same place where we are and are not willing to lose one more child, one more spouse, one more family. I think the power that those two groups showed were important. And I think the lesson to be learned from this is that we can do a world of good together. I am very proud of being a Latina, but I'm also very proud of linking arm in arm with my sisters in other communities. And right now it's us knowing how to build familia that should be figuring out how we're building this army of women of color for the next election, and not just the next presidential election, but midterms. They matter a lot. I'm looking at you, Georgia. We got a lot of work to do, and we have a triple-digit growth of Latinas in the state of Georgia, right? So we look at the states that are large Latino, but look at the states that are growing. Look at Georgia. Keep looking at Georgia. Don't take your eyes off it, because we had 116% growth of Latinos in that state. That matters. So understanding that we did something huge and then linking arms with the other women who had huge material outcomes for this election, and starting to think very intelligently, very strategically, with targets in our minds of how we're going to go after their states where we see growing numbers of our community where we know we can make a difference.
And we do have so much power. And going back to what Nancy's saying is, linking together with our sisters and making sure that others outside don't cause this divide, because unfortunately the very next day, it was about division. It was about, no, these women did it. This group didn't do it. And they do it so well that they have you believing it. So, there is power in unity, and they know that. So they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that the narrative is we are not united. But there is so much, like you were just saying, Georgia, let's keep our eyes on Georgia. Let's keep our eyes on all of these states that really have a huge number of Latinos, a huge number of African-American communities. And we have more in common than not. We are tired of losing loved ones. We are tired of the injustices. We are tired of the lack of good schools in our neighborhoods. We are tired of the lack of healthcare for our loved ones. We are tired of retiring and retiring into poverty. I mean, we are fed up with it, and I know that we're not the only ones. So the unity is key. Linking arms with our sisters is key. And I would love to see more of that happen. I would love to see more of these conversations include other communities and our other sisters, because I do believe that is something that is lacking right now. And we can't afford any type of division, not 1 second more of division. And they know that. So now we need to come together. And so I'm looking at people like Monica and Nancy. You guys have so much power. Sign me up, include me in any, discussions that need to happen, because I do feel that we need to do a lot more with our communities, joining together with other communities, so that we can stop this narrative that it's us against them, them against us.
Yeah, I hear to everything that was said by Nancy and by Selenis. And I also would like to say that we have to think about civic engagement as a year-round, everyday activity, and that it's not just about voting. And the other thing is, it isn't just about us deciding who is best to represent us. We need to understand that we represent us, and we can represent us either as appointed officials, like Nancy was appointed and led a really important bureau in the federal government, but there are lots of other appointed seats at the local level, at the state level. And what about running for office? We can be the ones who are running our government, and we should be. And I think it's really important as we go forward to think about how we are setting ourselves up to be in those leadership positions, because we need a reflective democracy. And the only way that that's going to happen is by having people like us throw our hat into the ring, and people like us supporting each other to do that. So, here's to more of us showing up in the civic engagement space across the various ways of doing so, whether that means volunteering, donating, running, seeking an appointment. We can and we should do all of it.
Thank you so much, Monica, Nancy, and Selenis, for being here with us today in this Latina Power and Equality panel in Hispanicized Latina Represents a special edition. I was thrilled and I was really honored to be here with you guys today. And always remember, raise our voice to show up for other Latinas and to believe that we are so powerful. Thank you so much again.